Introduction. In October 1927, the weather in Brussels, Belgium was cold and gray. Inside a grand building, 29 of the smartest people in the world sat around a large table. They were there for the Solvay conference. You might recognize some of their names. Albert Einstein was there with his messy hair. Marie Curie was there too. These scientists were fighting about how the world actually works. For a long time, people thought the universe was like a giant clock. If you knew how the gears moved, you could predict everything. But a new group of thinkers, led by men like Werner Heisenberg and Niels Bohr, had a different idea. They were looking at tiny bits of matter called electrons and photons. They noticed something that seemed impossible. When they weren't looking at these tiny particles, the particles acted like waves. They were everywhere and nowhere at the same time. But the moment a scientist looked at them, the particles stopped being waves. They turned into solid things in one specific spot. This was the birth of the observer effect. It changed everything. It meant that the person watching the experiment was actually changing the experiment just by looking at it. One of the scientists, Werner Heisenberg, later explained that the act of watching isn't just sitting back and seeing what happens. It is an act of creation. This idea felt like a punch to the gut for many old-school scientists. It meant that the world isn't just a solid thing that happens to us. Instead, we are part of the process. We are not just fans in the stands watching a game. We are the players on the field. If just looking at a tiny particle can change where it goes, imagine what your mind, the most powerful tool in the universe, can do to your daily life. The frustrated passenger. Most people spend their lives feeling like they are sitting in the backseat of a car they don't own. The car is moving fast, and they don't like where it's going. Maybe it's headed toward more bills, a job that feels like a heavy weight, or relationships that leave them feeling lonely. They try to grab the steering wheel by working harder. They stay late at the office. They try to be nicer to people who don't treat them well. They worry about money until their heads hurt. But no matter how hard they push, the car keeps going the wrong way. They feel like a frustrated passenger. It's easy to believe that some people are just born lucky. We see the person who always gets the promotion, the friend who finds a perfect partner without trying, or the neighbor who always has enough money for a fancy vacation. We think, maybe the universe just likes them better. But that isn't true. The difference between the person who is stuck and the person who is thriving isn't luck. It isn't even about how hard they work. It's about their internal frequency. Think of your life like a radio. If you want to hear jazz music, you have to tune the dial to the jazz station. If you are tuned to the everything is hard station, you can't hear the everything is working out music. It doesn't matter how loud you turn up the volume. You are on the wrong station. The frustration you feel right now is actually a good sign. It's a signal from your inner self saying that you are meant for more. You aren't supposed to be a passenger. You were born to be the conscious architect of your own world. This book is the manual that shows you how to get out of the backseat and take the wheel. The $10 million check. In 1985, a young man named Jim Carrey was broke. He was a comedian, but he didn't have a big movie role yet. He was living in an old, beat-up car. Most people in his shoes would have given up. They would have focused on the empty gas tank and the lack of food. But Jim understood the power of the mind. Every night, he would drive his old car up to a hill overlooking Los Angeles. He would sit there and look at the city lights. He didn't just wish for success. He visualized it. He took out a checkbook and wrote himself a check for $10 million. In the memo line, he wrote, "For services rendered." He gave himself a deadline of Thanksgiving 1995. He put that check in his wallet. It stayed there for years, getting old and torn. Jim didn't just wait around, though. He worked on his jokes. He went to auditions. But more importantly, he felt like he already had that money. He walked like a man who was successful. He thought like a man who was wealthy. He was observing a different reality, just like those scientists in Brussels. Just before Thanksgiving in 1994, Jim Carrey found out he was going to be paid exactly $10 million for his role in the movie Dumb and Dumber. The universe didn't just give him a gift. He had created a mental blueprint, and the world had no choice but to build it. This isn't magic. It is how your brain works. When you give your mind a clear target, it starts to find the paths to get there. It's like a GPS. Once you put in the address, the car starts to tell you where to turn. But if you never put in the address, you just drive in circles. The lemon in your mind. To understand why this works, we have to look at how your brain talks to your body. In 1996, a researcher named Dr. Richard Davidson did a famous study. He wanted to see if the brain could tell the difference between something happening in real life and something being imagined. He asked people to think about a lemon. Try it right now. Close your eyes for a second. Imagine a bright yellow lemon sitting on a wooden cutting board. See the shiny skin. Now, imagine taking a sharp knife and slicing it in half. A little bit of juice sprays into the air. You can smell that sharp, sour scent. Now, imagine picking up one of those slices and taking a big, juicy bite. Most people, just by reading those words, will feel their mouth start to water. Their tongue might even feel a little tingle. But there is no lemon. There is no juice. There is no knife. Your body reacted to a thought as if it were a physical fact. Your brain sent a signal to your mouth to make spit, because it truly believed a lemon was there. This is a huge secret. Your subconscious mind, the part of you that breathes for you and keeps your heart beating, does not know the difference between what is happening out there and what you are picturing in here. If you spend your day picturing your bank account being empty, your body feels the stress as if it's already happening. Your brain stays in survival mode. It shuts down the creative parts of your mind that could help you find a way to make money. But if you can learn to picture abundance as clearly as you pictured that lemon, your body and your world will start to respond. You can literally rewire your brain to see opportunities that were always there, but were invisible to you because you were too focused on the sour parts of life. Sarah's rainy day. Let's look at a woman named Sarah Jenkins. Sarah is 34 years old and lives in a small apartment in Portland, Oregon. On a Tuesday morning, she is sitting at her desk at a marketing agency. The sky outside is a dull gray, and the rain is tapping against the window. Sarah is a good graphic designer. She works hard. She stays late. But she feels like she is running on a treadmill. She has $15,000 in credit card debt that never seems to go away. Every time she pays a little bit off, her car breaks down or her cat Pixel needs to go to the vet. Today, her boss called her in for a review. Sarah hoped for a raise. She had been dreaming about finally paying off that one high-interest card. But her boss just sighed and said, "Sarah, you're doing great, but the budget is tight this year. No raises for anyone." Sarah felt a familiar, crushing weight in her chest. As she walked back to her desk, she thought, "I knew it. Nothing ever works out for me. I have to work twice as hard as everyone else just to stay afloat." On her way to the bus stop, she stopped by a free library box, one of those wooden boxes on the sidewalk where people leave old books. She saw a dusty book about manifestation. She scoffed at it. "Yeah, right," she whispered to herself. "Like thinking about $1 million is going to pay my electric bill." Still, something made her reach out and take it. She shoved it into her bag and got on the bus. She was tired of being a passenger. She was tired of the rain. She didn't know it yet, but that little book was about to show her that the rain wasn't the problem. The problem was the umbrella of doubt she was carrying everywhere. Sarah represents so many of us. She is smart, she is kind, and she wants to do good work. But she is trapped in a loop of not enoughness. She believes that life is something that happens to her. She doesn't realize that her own thoughts are the observers creating her gray, rainy reality. Over the next several chapters, We are going to follow Sarah as she tries to put these tools to work. We will see her succeed, we will see her stumble, and we will see her finally learn how to build the life she actually wants. Why this book is different. There are a lot of books about the law of attraction. Some of them make it sound like you just have to sit on a pillow and wish for a Ferrari. Others make it sound like a magic spell. This book is different because it focuses on the science of the soul. We aren't just going to talk about good vibes. We are going to talk about the reticular activating system, ROS, the part of your brain that acts like a gatekeeper. Once you learn how to program it, you will start seeing coincidences that lead you straight to your goals. Subconscious rewiring, how to find the software bugs in your mind, those old stories your parents or teachers told you, and delete them for good. The internal radio dial, how to shift your emotional state so you are a vibrational match for wealth, love, and health. Inspired action, the difference between busy work, which makes you tired, and inspired action, which makes you successful. You are going to learn that manifestation is a skill, just like riding a bike or cooking a meal. It takes practice, but once you know the steps, you can't unknow them. We will use the wisdom of great teachers from the past. You will meet Neville Goddard, who taught that your imagination is the literal creator of your world. You will meet Florence Scovel Shinn, who showed how the words we speak act like seeds in a garden. And you will see the modern work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, who used these exact principles to heal his own broken spine when doctors said he would never walk again. The roadmap ahead. We are about to go on a journey together. First, we will dive into your internal biology. You will learn how your heart and brain work together to send out a signal to the world. You will see that you are a walking, talking radio tower. Next, we will look at abundance. You will learn why most people push money away even when they say they want it. We will help you raise your wealth thermostat so you can finally feel comfortable having more than enough. Then, we will tackle the subconscious garden. We will find the weeds of fear and doubt and pull them out by the roots. You will learn the art of scripting, writing your future so clearly that your brain thinks it has already happened. We will also talk about relationships. You will see how your view of yourself acts like a mirror. If you don't like what you see in the mirror, you don't try to fix the mirror. You fix the person standing in front of it. Finally, I will give you a 10-day reset. This is a step-by-step plan to take everything you've learned and put it into action. By the end of those 10 days, you won't just be a person who knows about manifestation. You will be a person who lives it. You might feel a little bit like Sarah right now. Maybe you are skeptical. Maybe you've tried positive thinking before and it didn't work. That's okay. You don't have to believe in this 100% for it to start working. You just have to be willing to try it a different way. The scientists in 1927 discovered that the world isn't as solid as it looks. It's flexible. It's waiting for someone to tell it what to be. You are the one it has been waiting for. You are the architect. The tools are in your hands. Let's begin. Chapter 1: Rewiring Your Internal Frequency. The moment you decide to no longer be defined by your past, your body begins to respond to a new future. These words weren't written by a philosopher sitting in a quiet garden. They were the hard-won realization of a man lying flat on his back, staring at a hospital ceiling, wondering if he would ever walk again. In 1986, Joe Dispenza was a young, fit chiropractor competing in a triathlon in Palm Springs, California. He was in the middle of the biking segment, pedaling hard through a busy intersection. A police officer was waving him through, but a four-wheel drive SUV coming from behind didn't see him. The vehicle slammed into Joe at 55 miles per hour. He was tossed into the air like a rag doll. When he hit the pavement, the impact was so violent that it shattered 6 of his vertebrae. The bone fragments were pushed into his spinal cord. The medical prognosis was grim. The top surgeons in the area told him that his only hope was a radical surgery called a Harrington rod procedure. They wanted to cut him open and bolt long stainless steel rods into his spine. It would likely leave him with a permanent disability and a lifetime of chronic pain. Joe sat in his hospital bed and faced a choice that would change the course of his life and eventually the lives of millions of others. He could listen to the experts who saw his body as a broken machine, or he could listen to a quiet voice inside him that believed the body had its own intelligence. He decided to refuse the surgery. He checked himself out of the hospital and moved into the home of a friend. For the next several weeks, he lived in a state of total isolation. He had one goal: to mentally reconstruct his spine bone by bone. The battle inside the mind. Every day, for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening, Joe lay still and closed his eyes. In his mind, he would travel to his spine. He would visualize the shattered vertebrae knit back together. He would imagine the nerves healing and the bone fragments dissolving. It sounds simple, but it was the hardest work he had ever done. For the first few weeks, his mind was a mess. He would start visualizing a vertebra, and then he would find himself thinking about the pain, the what-ifs, or the bills he had to pay. Every time his focus drifted, he would stop and start over. He refused to let a single low-frequency thought finish its sentence. He realized that his body was living in a state of survival mode. It was flooded with stress hormones because he was constantly reacting to the trauma of the accident. To heal, he had to move his body out of that survival state and into a creation state. He had to convince his brain and his cells that the healing had already happened. After 6 weeks of this grueling mental rehearsal, something clicked. He started to feel a shift. The pain began to recede. His focus became sharp and unwavering. By 9.5 weeks, Joe Dispenza didn't just crawl or limp out of his house. He walked. He returned to his life and his practice, but he was a different man. He had proven that the mind is not just a passenger in the body, it is the driver. This experience led him to a lifetime of research into neuroscience and quantum physics. He wanted to know why his mental focus worked. What he discovered is that we are all broadcasting a literal electromagnetic signature into the world. Our thoughts act as the electrical charge, and our feelings act as the magnetic charge. Together, they create what we can call an internal radio dial. The invisible waves of reality. To understand how Joe healed his spine and how you can change your life, you have to look at how we communicate across distances. Long before we had smartphones and Wi-Fi, the world was skeptical about the idea of invisible information moving through the air. In 1901, a scientist named Guglielmo Marconi stood on a cold, windy cliff in Newfoundland, Canada. He had a simple, crazy idea. He believed he could send a signal across the Atlantic Ocean without any wires. Most people at the time thought this was impossible. They believed that because the Earth was curved, a radio signal would just fly off into space instead of following the ground. Marconi didn't listen. He set up a massive antenna and a primitive receiver. On the other side of the ocean in England, his team tapped out the letter S in Morse code. It was just 3 short clicks. Marconi sat in his hut, listening through a headset. Against all odds, he heard it. The clicks had traveled over 2,000 miles through the empty air. Marconi proved that just because we can't see something, doesn't mean it isn't there. The air around you right now is thick with information. There are radio songs, television shows, and cellular data flying through the room. You can't see them, smell them, or touch them. But if you have a receiver, like a radio or a phone, and you tune it to the right frequency, that invisible information becomes your reality. Your brain and your heart work exactly like Marconi's radio. Your brain is a transmitter that sends out electrical signals based on what you think. Your heart is a powerful magnet that pulls in experiences based on how you feel. When your thoughts and feelings are in sync, you create a signal that the universe responds to. The problem for most of us is that we are tuned to the wrong station. We spend our lives broadcasting the scarcity station or the worry network, and then we wonder why our lives are full of static. The science of the heart. For a long time, we thought the brain was the boss of everything. We believed the heart just pumped blood. But in 1995, the Harmath Institute conducted a study that turned this idea on its head. They wanted to see if human intention and emotion could actually change the physical world at a microscopic level. They took a group of people who were trained in heart coherence, a state where you feel deep feelings of gratitude, love, or appreciation. They gave these people test tubes containing strands of DNA. The researchers found something incredible. When the people just thought about changing the DNA, pure intention, nothing happened. When they just felt love or gratitude, pure emotion, nothing happened. But when they combined the two, when they held a clear intention in their mind and felt a strong, positive emotion in their heart, the DNA strands actually changed shape. They uncoiled or folded in response to the signal being sent by the person holding the tube. This study showed that manifestation isn't just wishful thinking. It is a biological process. You are a bioelectrical being. Every time you have a thought, you are firing a neurological circuit in your brain. Every time you have a feeling, you are producing a chemical that circulates through your body. If you think the same thoughts and feel the same feelings every day, you are essentially wiring your brain into a fixed pattern. You become a walking record of your past. To change your life, you have to break that pattern. You have to rewire your internal frequency so you can tune into a different station. Sarah's internal radio check. Back in her small studio apartment in Portland, Sarah Jenkins sat in her thinking chair with her cat, Pixel, curled up on her lap. The rain was tapping against the glass, a sound that usually made her feel lonely and small. She had just finished reading about Joe Dispenza's recovery, and for the first time in years, she felt a tiny spark of something that wasn't cynicism. She decided to try a vibration check. She closed her eyes and tried to listen to the background music of her own mind. At first, it was hard to hear anything over the sound of her own heartbeat and the hum of the refrigerator. But as she got quiet, she began to notice the loop. I'm so tired. I hope that bill doesn't bounce. Why did I say that stupid thing to my boss today? I'll probably never get that promotion anyway. I'm just not the kind of person things work out for. It was like a radio station that played the same 3 sad songs on repeat, 24 hours a day. Sarah realized that she was in survival mode. Her body was prepared for a disaster that hadn't happened yet, but because she was thinking about it, her brain was releasing the chemicals of stress as if it were happening. She looked at her hands. They were slightly shaking. She realized she had been living in this state for so long that it felt normal. She was broadcasting a signal of not enoughness to the world, and the world was simply reflecting that back to her in the form of a cluttered cubicle and a mounting pile of debt. Okay, she whispered to Pixel. If Joe can fix his spine, I can at least change the station. She tried to think of something, anything that felt like abundance. She didn't have a lot of money, and her job was a dead end, but she looked around her room. She saw her favorite soft blanket. She saw the way the lamplight made the room look cozy. She felt the warmth of the cat. For 30 seconds, she stopped worrying about the how, and just focused on the feeling of being safe and warm. It was a tiny shift, like moving the radio dial just a fraction of an inch, but for those 30 seconds the static cleared. Survival mode versus creation mode. Most people spend about 70% of their lives in survival mode. This is a state driven by the fight or flight response. When you are stressed, your brainwaves move into what scientists call high beta. In high beta, your focus is narrow. You are looking for threats. You are obsessed with time, your body, and your environment. You are trying to predict the future based on your past pains. This is a terrible state for manifestation because you are essentially telling the universe, I am in danger and I don't have what I need. When you are in survival mode, your internal radio dial is stuck on a frequency of lack. You are sending out a signal that says, I need this thing because I don't have it. The problem is that the quantum field, the invisible web of energy that makes up our world, doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to who you are. If you are wanting, you are broadcasting the frequency of not having. Therefore, the universe gives you more not having. To manifest, you have to move from high beta brainwaves into alpha or theta. These are the slower, more relaxed brainwaves we experience during meditation or just before we fall asleep. In this state, the gate between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind opens. This is creation mode. In this state, you stop being a victim of your circumstances and start being the architect of your reality. You begin to broadcast a new electromagnetic signature. Instead of saying, "I want," you start saying, "Thank you." Gratitude is the ultimate state of receivership. When you feel grateful, you are telling your body and the universe that the event you are waiting for has already happened. Your heart opens, your signal becomes clear, and you start to pull experiences toward you instead of chasing them. The practice of rewiring. Rewiring your frequency isn't a one-time event. It is a habit. Just as Joe Dispenza had to restart his visualization every time his mind wandered, you have to catch yourself when you slip back into your old radio stations. You can start this process right now by following a few simple steps. The frequency audit. Several times a day, stop what you are doing and ask, "What station am I tuned to?" Are you in survival mode, stress, hurry, lack, or creation mode, presence, gratitude, possibility? The circuit breaker. If you catch yourself in a negative loop, don't judge yourself. Just say change or stop and take 3 deep breaths. This physically interrupts the firing of those old neural circuits. Elevated emotion. Find one small thing to be genuinely grateful for. It doesn't have to be $1 million. It can be the taste of your coffee or the fact that you can breathe. The goal is to feel the emotion in your chest. That is your magnetic pull. Mental rehearsal. Spend 5 minutes before bed imagining a future version of yourself. Don't just see it like a movie, feel it. What does it feel like to be debt-free? What does it feel like to be in a loving relationship? When you do this, you are teaching your body emotionally what your future will feel like before it has happened. You are laying down the new wiring in your brain. Joe Dispenza didn't walk out of that house because of luck. He walked out because he refused to accept a reality that didn't match his internal vision. He mastered the art of tuning his radio to the frequency of healing, until his physical body had no choice but to follow the signal. The world around you is not fixed. It is a mirror reflecting your internal state. If you don't like what you see in the mirror, you don't try to change the reflection by touching the glass. You change the person standing in front of it. You change your thoughts, you change your feelings, and you change your frequency. The signals are already in the air. The abundance, the love, and the success you are looking for are already broadcasting. You just have to tune your dial to the right station. The moment you decide to no longer be defined by your past, your body begins to respond to a new future. Chapter 2: Abundance, the Science of Living in Flow. In a small town in the late 1800s, 2 men named Elias and Arthur ran shops on the same street. Elias sold dry goods and kept his shop dark to save money on oil lamps. He watched every penny like a hawk. If a customer asked for a discount, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. To Elias, every dollar that left his hand was a dollar he would never see again. He believed the world was a place of not enough, so he gripped his life with white knuckles. Across the street, Arthur ran a similar shop, but it felt entirely different. He kept his windows clean and his lamps lit. He often gave away small bags of sweets to children, or offered a free cup of tea to a tired traveler. People told Arthur he was being foolish. They said he was bleeding money. But Arthur didn't see it that way. He believed that money was like water in a river. It had to move to stay fresh. If you dammed it up, it became a stagnant pond. By the end of 5 years, Elias was miserable. His shop was dusty, his customers felt his tension and stayed away, and he lived in constant fear of a rainy day. Arthur, however, had expanded his business. He had more friends, more energy, and ironically, a much larger bank account. The two men lived in the same town with the same weather and the same customers. The only difference was how they viewed the flow of the world.